Hey everybody, what's up? This is A7X Fan Ben, and today's video is going to be about forum topics you should read. So by now you probably know about the Miniature Trading Forum, and hopefully you have an account there. MiniatureTrading.com is the best and most active site for Pirate CSG, the game. So it's pretty much the most active forum as well, and it also has some other features which I talked about in another video. So I created back in 2015, I created something called the Thread of Threads because I wanted like an archive of the best threads at miniature trading, like the most useful ones. So I'm just going to go through, I selected a handful from that just now. So I'm going to go through those and then I'm going to put links to the URLs in the description as well. So then you don't have to search for them too badly. But I would highly recommend going through the thread of threads when you have time. It has a lot of great stuff in it beyond what I'm going to talk about right now. It is pretty overwhelming, but if you ever have time, or if you're really addicted and obsessed with this game at any point, it can be pretty entertaining and also really useful information. And I recently also made videos about the search functions, and a lot of the stuff, a lot of questions people can have, especially newbies, a lot of the questions they have are answered by various threads in the thread of threads. So I'm just going to start. I started selecting threads basically from the top, but I think I'm going to go in reverse order, I guess. So I'm going to start with the oldest and then go to the newest, but in the thread of threads, the most recent threads are on the top of each section. So I'm going to go from the bottom up on the thread of threads. So basically, I have different sections. So I made one for the rules, and then very useful threads, pretty self-explanatory. Ongoing threads are ones that are posted in a lot and have like a ton of pages, and they're constantly updated. And then the Fleet Challenge has its own thread, the archives, which is cool to check out if you're really into Fleet Challenges. And then the rankings threads have a section right now, which I'm probably going to eliminate sometime and just make it like a huge rankings thread with all of those threads in it. And then famous discussions is where you find a lot of the threads I'm going to talk about now. And then also I have like some other cool stuff that's kind of like miscellaneous that's maybe not as famous, but it's still pretty cool stuff to look at. So I'm going to start from the bottom. I think this was in the cool stuff section, but redesigning the ramming and boarding mechanics is from 2015, so this is actually pretty recent. Unfortunately, the member is already gone now, but this thread has a lot of cool stuff about ramming and boarding, and I've talked about how in my basic rules I changed it so that the winner of the boarding party gets to choose which treasure they take, but then the loser picks which crew they eliminate. So I still think that's a great ruling, but there's a lot of other great ideas in this thread, and it's pretty cool to read, especially if you're a player or if you played a lot of games or have like a really high passion for playing the game. It's a great thread to look at in terms of rules changes. And then this one, I started this thread because I was inspired by another thread that talked about who has a group or con. And this one is basically so everybody says where they're located to try to facilitate meetups. So this one's a good one to read because you can see which players might be close to you, and you can also post there to state your location. And then, oh, okay, so this one's really old actually. This is from 2007. This is Vlad Impaler. He basically went on like a rant about how Spain was shafted in the different sets, especially the later ones and stuff. So this one's not as like useful, but it's pretty funny. So it's probably one of the funniest threads that has ever been there, and it's kind of infamous nowadays, or at least it was. This one is cool. Pirates How to Do It Right. So this one is kind of like a little bit of frustration at like a game designers. You can see the post. It was early 2008, so some of the not as good sets were coming out, and people kind of ranting against WizKids and some of the design changes that occurred as the sets went on. But it's really interesting and useful to see like what people want for the game, to see like what people were annoyed with, and pretty much you can see in this thread are summarized like a lot of the reasons that the game declined and eventually went out of production. This one similarly early 2008. So this is basically when the game designers talked about how they're trying to do less historical stuff, mostly because it would probably get into lawsuits with like families of like past pirates and things like that. And so they were going to do more. They were planning on doing more like wacky, gimmicky stuff and less historical stuff, which pretty much nobody wanted. And you can see Old Man talking about how it's stupid, which it was just pretty disappointing. I wasn't around the forum at this time. I didn't even know there was like an online community for the game. I was on my like weird hiatus, but it's definitely interesting to see some of the original content back when things were still going on, back when production was still happening. And then the next one, there was a lawsuit between Wizards of the Coast and WizKids about the name, because the Constructible strategy game name was basically Wizards of the Coast like claimed ownership of it or something. So that's the reason. That's part of the reason WizKids had to change the name to the Cursed Seas Pocket Mile game instead of the CSG, which is the name I much prefer in the original name. And then there's links in some of these threads to some other stuff too, which is useful. And then this one, this one's like one of the saddest threads. It was November 10th, 2008. That's the day that the game basically stopped. So this is when WizKids like randomly like closed up. So the WizKids forum went down, and things started falling apart. Pretty much all of a sudden, like there were signs that something like that would happen, but it was pretty crazy to all of a sudden see it all come crashing down. And then the next day, Wolf made his first post, as far as I know, and introduced himself and talked about the game and how he worked for WizKids, not in a financial role, but just he helped them a bit as the rules arbitrator and stuff like that. And he shared some thoughts about the game. So this is back when he was new to the forum, and they talk about like the demise of WizKids and things like that. So it's a good thread to check out. And then Ray of Hope. This is one of my favorites ever. This is a 21-page thread, which back in 2008 those were extremely rare. So this is like one of the biggest threads ever, especially by those days standards. It's basically, at this point, it's mostly false hope, so it's kind of sad to look back at it, but it's pretty much right after, you can see this thread started 2008, November. So soon after, like a week after the game went under, there was a lot of speculation on who would buy the rights to the game, things like that, and like if WizKids would be purchased or things like that, different like business deals were going on. So and then it gets off topic in some of the other pages, which is part of the reason it's so long, but it's a really good thread to look at, one of my favorites. Petition to NECA, this one is interesting. Basically, there's a petition about restarting the game, things like that. So this didn't really go anywhere, of course, but it's still interesting to read about, especially all the different responses too. It's kind of an odd case, but definitely good to look at. Wolf started this one too, hypothetical banned items list. This one I've dragged this up a handful of times and got it unlocked. I think it's one of the coolest threads, just to see different people's perspectives on things, like what should be banned, what shouldn't be banned, if anything should be banned, things like that. And there's a lot of great old responses, and then since I kind of revived it a bit a few times, there's a lot of the newer members have commented there as well. So that's a good one. How did they do it? This one is probably top 3 or top 5 all-time threads for me, because it started out just talking about like how the cards were made, but then it got way more intense because people started talking about like trying to do it themselves and trying to make like a custom set, or trying to figure out like costs of like what it would cost to produce like a full set at like a production scale, or if you did like different types of materials, seeing what those would cost at different like set like levels, like if you wanted to make a set for like 50 people, what it would cost like per set and things like that. And then like talking about, they got into the legal stuff, which is really interesting and pretty much the biggest hurdle to overcome right now, because NECA still has the rights, but they're not doing anything with it. And so it got into the legal stuff and a lot of different discussion. So it's probably, if I could recommend any thread, this would probably be in the top like 2 or 3 threads that you should definitely read. So how did they do it? Like I said, I'll put links to the threads in the description of this video, so then you can check them out there. And then next one, oh, so this was in 2012 when they announced that the game would come back as a card game. which is interesting, but it didn't work out at all, and it doesn't seem like it sold well because they haven't done anything with it since. So it's pretty much a failure, but it's interesting to look at least because this is pretty much since November 10th, 2008. This is basically the only thing we've seen or had in terms of like a press release and in terms of actually the game being re-released in any form, which of course it was a huge disappointment, but it's still good to check out, especially if you weren't on the forum at that time. This is a thread I like a lot. New pirate CSG concepts for a new age. This one, kind of similar to the ramming and boarding thread. It talks about different rules changes and things like that, like hull health versus mast health, things like that. There's a lot of longer posts, which is nice. There's a lot of short posts on the forum, which is fine, but this one gets pretty in-depth and kind of intense in terms of the discussion. And I think another good one for players to look at if you like playing the game a lot. It's definitely a great thread to look at. This was one I started a couple years ago. It's really, I love it because people talk about what they like the most about the game. So it's almost like a great like advertisement to restart the game in a way, and people get to talk about why they love it so much and things like that. So that's a great thread if like somebody is on the fence about like starting the game, or if you're trying to get people into the game, you could show them this thread because it highlights a lot of the coolest parts about the game, so it might get them more interested. This one, okay, so now we're back to some of the older stuff. This is like more like press release type stuff. This is back in 2008, so it's more stuff from when the game went under in like the week after that, and like the different things that were happening. And repairing your ships. Oh, so now we're into the useful threads from the thread of threads. So this just has ideas, pretty self-explanatory ideas about like repairing your ships, like tape and glue and whatever, things like that. Similarly, storage options. This one's actually really recent. They did talk about a little different storage. There's a lot of links to different like storage boxes and bins and containers and things like that. So that one's good. And then on a similar tack, this one is from 2013, but it has pretty much the same type of discussion, but a little bit different stuff talked about. So once again, like I said, like a lot of people wonder about like what to do with storage, or what like where the pirate code is and things like that, and it's already been covered on the forum in the past. So looking at the archived threads is a really good idea to source ideas and inspiration from. And then this is one of my all-time favorites and one of my best creations, game ideas. This one's from 2014, but I continually update it with new ideas. You can see it was edited just a couple of weeks ago, edited 31 times in total. So this is like a manifesto for players who want to change their games up, and I'm actually going to go through this thread in a future video and talk about which ones I've played, which ones I like the best, and things like that, and which ones I'm most excited about playing in the future. So there's different scenarios. There's all the different campaign game rule sets are linked here. And this one is now a sticky thread too, so it's at the top of the forum, so it's really easy to find. So you may have already seen it. Variant rule sets, all the custom sets I've ever found are linked there. And then there's a bunch of other ideas too. It's just, I've played this game more than pretty much anybody, especially nowadays, in the past like 6 years or so. But even I haven't even come close to doing everything in this thread, and I maybe never will. I hope so, eventually in the coming decades. But it's an amazing resource, and it's a really good way to change up your games if you're kind of bored of the standard 40-point format, or need to find like a scenario or a campaign game rule set to try out to really totally change your outlook on how the game is played. So it's a really nice thread to look at, especially good for players, like I said. And this is the new rules thread. Pretty much continues where the other one left off. Wolf made a new one because the pirate code was revised, and the revision was finished in December 2016. So there's a new version of the pirate code, like he talks about here. So now there's a new rules thread, which will cover all questions that might be clarified in the next pirate code, which, who knows, that could be a long way off, but because so many questions have been asked. And then There's a link here to the old rule set, which is really interesting. I might just put this in the description as well. This one's 143 pages, so it's pretty overwhelming, but again, if you're like a hardcore player, this one is just fascinating to look through. And there's some like really interesting and pretty deep discussions on like how things work rules wise and like why they function the way they function and things like that. And Wolf, as always, is awesome and answers all the questions we have. So it's nice to have him still around. And I think that's pretty much it. So that's it for now. But the Thread of Threads has a lot of other great threads, and there's also some that I'm sure I missed. So the Thread of Threads doesn't have like every great thread ever at miniature trading, but it has most of the good ones for pirates. And like I said, I would highly recommend looking through it in more detail soon. But those are the ones, those are kind of like the all-star threads that I picked out just now, kind of like on a whim, that I would say are the best. And like some of the ongoing threads are actually great to read, like the eBay sales thread and battle reports. Those are two gigantic threads that would be really great to look through, like for eBay prices and like collecting strategies and things like that. And then of course battle reports is, I started that one. Hopefully that's entertaining. But both of those, I didn't really mention those because both of those would take ages to actually read post for post. But so I highlighted some of the more important ones and some of the more noteworthy ones in this video. And I'll be back with some more videos soon. So thank you for watching.